Chapter 7 has a lot of information and missing pieces in it. For us, it answered how we got from the murder of Jeff McCoy to the states of Kentucky and West Virginia almost going to war again. Also, we have been briefly introduced to the character of Perry Klein before now. However, Klein will play more of a role in what happens to the feud from this point forward. We will also be introduced to Frank Phillips as he begins his raids to arrest the Hatfields and free the McCoys across the Tug River. We will be reading from the chapter directly with the discussion to follow next week. All aboard the Kentucky Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The reading of the newspaper article. Quote, Chapter 7, Efforts to Bring the Hatfields to Justice. The death of Jeff McCoy led to the first efforts worthy of the name to bring the Hatfields to trial for their crimes. Jeff was the nephew of Perry Klein, a leading lawyer of Pike County. Lawyer Klein set about getting rewards offered for the arrest of the murderers, not only of Jeff McCoy, but of Talbert, Farmer, and Little Randolph McCoy. $100 each was the sum offered. Two of Jeff's brothers, Bud and Jake, heard that Wallace was working on the extension of the railroad along the Big Sandy and went down there and got him. He was in Pikeville jail 4 weeks, and then one night, when a son of Perry Klein carried food to the prisoners, Klein being the jailer, the boy was overpowered and all hands escaped, including John C. McCoy, who was in for a stabbing not connected with the feud. The escape of Tom incited Perry Klein to further efforts, and application was made to Governor Willis Wilson of West Virginia for a requisition for the indicted men. Up to this time, politics had nothing to do with the feud, but it now entered in. In the office of the Secretary of State of West Virginia was one John B. Floyd, a nephew of the member of the President Buchanan's cabinet of that name. Floyd aspired to be his party's candidate for governor, and to that end, wished to have his county solid behind him. His home was in Logan County, and he knew the Hatfields personally. They are a most prolific race and were powerful political workers in the mountains. Floyd heard of the application to Governor Wilson and sent word to the Hatfields. Under his instructions, they got up a petition saying that they were peaceful mountain farmers who had been greatly oppressed and abused by the relatives of a Kentucky desperado named Randolph McCoy, and praying that the governor would not further the ends of the Kentucky villain by giving them over to be tried. The Hatfield regulators rode up and down the creeks and branches of half of Logan County, carrying their repeating rifles and their petition. Every man met signed the petition with alacrity. Nevertheless, Governor Wilson was for a time persuaded to issue a requisition. While negotiations pended, Governor Buckner offered $500 reward each for Bad Ants, Cap, and John C. Hatfield, Tom Mitchell, under the name of Chambers, and Tom Wallace. Along in October 1887, Governor Wilson wrote to the county attorney Lee Ferguson of Pike County, saying that if $52 was sent to pay the expenses incurred by Clerk John B. Floyd while investigating the case papers for the arrest of all the indicted men, save Elias and Wall Hatfield and Andy Varney, would be issued. At this stage, a new man became involved in the feud. and he has since become the object of the most deadly hatred of the Hatfields and the contempt of even the McCoys, yet he is protected in Pike County. It was Deputy Sheriff Frank Phillips. He was appointed state agent for Kentucky to receive West Virginia prisoners. Phillips sent on a part of the $52 demanded by Governor Wilson and asked for the papers for Cap, Chauncey, and Anse Hatfield, and Tom Mitchell, who, however, was called Tom Chambers in the indictment. Tom was born out of wedlock, and one Tom Chambers subsequently married his mother, so he was called both Chambers and Mitchell. The error in the papers led to the arrest of his stepfather. Without waiting for the arrival of the papers, which, by the way, never came, Phillips, with Jim and Sam McCoy, sons of Randolph, started over to Virginia to bring in the four Logan men named, or any other indicted men they could find. They supposed Tom Chambers, the stepfather of Tom Mitchell, was the one the four wanted. They got to Tom's house at 11 o'clock on the night of December 9th, 1887. Tom was in bed. A bright coal fire burned in the hearth within, and a bright and unusually large bulldog stood guard outside. The three men dismounted with Sam at the front door and Jim and Phillips at the rear. Jim broke in the rear door, and at the same moment, the bulldog took a grip on Phillips' thighs. Phillips shot the dog with one revolver and held another on Chambers and made him surrender. The next raid was made on December 20th. Frank Phillips, Jim McCoy, and his cousin Bud, the murdered Jeff McCoy's brother, went up in McDowell County, West Virginia, and found Selkirk McCoy and Mose Christian in a little crossroads store near Perryville and brought them safely to Pikeville Jail. These two raids incited the Hatfields to a sort of revenge that horrified the people, not only of both counties, but of everyone else that ever heard the story. Even Bad Ants himself has talked against it. Unquote. The marriage of Perry Cline. In our last look at Perry Cline, we stated, quote, the McCoy family sought justice through Perry Cline, who was married to Martha McCoy, who was the widow of Asa McCoy, unquote. This simply was not so. Previously, when we had covered this feud, we found information over and over again that he was married to Martha Patty McCoy. But this was wrong information, and we do apologize for the mistake. The truth of the matter is, Perry Anderson Cline married Martha Atkins Cline in Pike County, Kentucky on September 19th, 1868. This does seem to be the marriage certificate of Perry and Martha Cline, but there are also some mistakes in it. The groom on the certificate is listed as Percy A. or R. Cline. This could be a misspelling of his name, or the clerk might have misheard him. The date of the potential marriage was September 3rd, 1868, not September 19th. But this can be explained away, as it might have taken them a couple of weeks to file the paperwork, or there was a delay for some reason in the wedding itself. All of the rest of the information on the certificate does seem to line up. We are interested in knowing if this is in fact the marriage certificate of Perry and Martha. Please let us know in the comments section below what you think. Klein's had several children together, and we are listing those that we could find from both of the online genealogies. They are John St. Clair Klein, Sr., 1869 to 1941, Alan D. Klein, 1872 to 1944, Roxy Klein Preston, 1875 to 1960, William Orlando Butler Good Klein, 1877 to 1958, Myra L. Klein Pernut, 1879 to 1916, Ella Ruth Klein Richards, 1883 to 1970, Jacob Perry Klein Sr., 1885 to 1961, and Maud Klein Yost, 1888 to 1965. Corrections about Klein's personal life. Despite Kevin Costner's version of the events concerning the feud, as far as the records go, Perry Klein did not have an affair with Rosanna McCoy. There is no evidence of this affair taking place, simply because as soon as it was discovered that Rosanna was pregnant with Johnson's child, she was sent away to live with a relative. The Costner version of Klein is inaccurate in many ways, and historians discount it as fiction. So, why bring it up? Not everything you see on television, even if it's based on a true story, is accurate. And we have had people who have actually commented that we did not cover this side of Perry Klein. Well, if it's not accurate information, we will not cover it. But if we do get enough comments, we will address it. As far as the information that we can find out about Martha McCoy, who was the widow of Asa McCoy, her name was Martha Patty Klein McCoy. She was the sister to Perry Klein. Now we have run across this problem before. You have two women with the same names that closely resemble each other. It is not that uncommon that with time and the story being retold in many different versions for the events surrounding the people involved and their situations to be mixed up. Martha Patty Klein married Asa Harmon McCoy on August 16, 1849, in Logan, Virginia. Asa died on January 7, 1865, on his way home after his service from the Civil War. It is suspected that he was the first death in the feud and that the Hatfield clan was behind his death, but this has never fully been proven. I am pretty sure that Perry Klein did take care of his widowed sister and her children after the death of Asa Harmon McCoy, as she never remarried. So, as we can see, Perry Klein was not married to his sister, Martha Patty, but was instead married to Martha Atkins. This is just the first of many corrections and apologies we will be making to the Klein family, as we were simply going on the online history as it was when the first video was made. Now that I'm allowed free reign, so to speak, with the research, I hope to get more of a correct picture of Perry Klein and why he was not very well liked by either side of the feud.
Jacob Klein Sr. According to multiple sources, Jacob Rich Jake Klein was born sometime in 1790 in Montgomery, Virginia, to Peter M. Klein Jr. and Elizabeth Lizzie Rife. Jacob Klein would marry Nancy Fuller on January 13, 1826, in Pike County, Kentucky. Together, the couple would have at least 4 sons and 5 daughters. They were William Trigger Klein, 1827 to 1891, Martha Klein, 1828 to 1907, Nancy Ann Klein, 1833 to 1867, Elizabeth Klein, 1833 to 1910, Peter William Klein, 1840 to 1918, Mary Klein, 1841 to 1891, Virginia Jane Klein, 1843 to 1911, Jacob Klein, 1846 to 1879, and Perry Anderson Klein, 1849 to 1891. Jacob Klein Sr.'s three youngest sons, Jacob Jr., Peter, and Perry, would play a huge part in the story that is to happen with the land later on. It is unclear why William was not named to also inherit the land, or to step in and raise his younger siblings. The first purchase of the land. According to the summary given in the source named The Truth About Perry Klein's Involvement in the Feud, we have the following story. We have tried to put this into a timeline in an order that makes sense to us. It is because of the Klein Association that we now have this piece of the larger puzzle. Before we get into the fight over the Grapevine Creek land, let's do a little history of the 5,000-acre plot of land. The land was originally part of a 30,000-acre tract of land that was owned by John Green of Philadelphia. Green acquired this land by the state of Virginia in 1796 when Green obtained a Treasury warrant. As far as the records go, Green nor his children lived on the property. However, records of this transaction can be found under the names, quote, 1796 Green Land Patent, unquote, and the Green Survey. In 1819, Jacob Klein Sr. purchased 5,000 acres, and it was part of the Green Survey, 30,000 acres from John Cobden. There would be a huge issue with this purchase, as John Cobden never owned the land that he sold. John Green died around 1828, with his only legal heirs being Anne Wharton and Sarah Green, his sisters. It was discovered several years after the purchase that there was a legal discrepancy by the sisters, and the lawsuit was filed. It can be found in the Tazewell County Chancery Court Records, 1846, Compton versus Klein. The sisters won their case, and Klein was forced to give up the property sometime before 1833. So, if we think about this, Jacob Klein bought this property thinking that it was a legitimate sale. Instead, John Compton swindled Jacob out of his money, and he once again had to purchase said land from the rightful owners. Margaret and David Mounts. Now, in 1828, Jacob Klein's sister Margaret and her husband David Mounts purchased 400 acres from the Green Survey. Their land was upriver from Jacob's property. The Mounts purchased the property from Cushings and Lawsons. Once Jacob Klein Sr. was forced to move, the sisters added that property to the remaining property that they had not yet sold, which was a total of 26,400 acres. This property was then sold to Anthony Lawson, an attorney living in Logan Courthouse, Logan County, Virginia, which later became West Virginia. In 1838, this land was then sold to John Lawson for $1,000. On October 25, 1839, Jacob Klein Sr. repurchased the land from John Lawson. Between 1839 and 1841, Klein built a homestead on the property. Around 1854, David Mounts died. Now, there was not a clear survey done of the two properties because Jacob and Margaret were brother and sister. However, with the death of David Mounts, the heirs wanted the land surveyed so they could divide the property up evenly. This caused a major issue because the property line was not clear. In 1855, a surveyor was hired for the task. Because of the potential of an unclear boundary line, Ance Hatfield would take advantage of this in a later lawsuit. It really was not that unusual for siblings to share boundary lines to their properties. After all, who cares who cuts whose grass, or where they plant their gardens, or where the pigsty or the barn sits, if everyone's animals are in it, if everyone is of the same family and shares everything? It is really only after the death of David Mounts that trouble began. It really is not known if the children of Mounts wanted to divide the land up to build homes on, or if they wanted to sell the land. And we were pretty shocked that the Klein family was not like other families, where only one child thinks that they should get everything and leave the other siblings with nothing. They pretty well divided everything on an equal basis from everything we can find out. The death of Jacob Klein Sr. Jacob Klein Sr. passed away sometime in 1858 at the estimated age of 67 to 68 years old. He would be buried at Delorme Cemetery in Delorme, Mingo County, West Virginia. And as we have said previously, he left his land to his three minor sons, Peter, Jacob Jr., and Perry. We do not know the reason why his eldest son, William Trigger, did not take the younger sons in to raise, or why he did not inherit part of the land. William would die in 1891, well after his father had passed away. Was William at odds with his father when Jacob died in 1858? Did William have lands and a family of his own, and therefore didn't need to be included in the inheritance? These are questions that we currently do not have answers for, but it is hopeful that one day we will find out the answer as to why William was left out of the will, so to speak. This event would change the Klein family forever. The fight for the Klein land was not over, and a new player came into the scene to take it from them. Would Ance Hatfield succeed in this endeavor? Would he also eventually lose the land, or would he be able to keep it? Perry Klein versus Anderson Hatfield. Here's how the story goes. Jacob Klein Sr. had died in 1858. The land was then inherited by his two underage sons, Jacob Jr., age 14, and Perry, age 12. Anderson Hatfield claimed that he held a title over the land because of a survey through his father. Two things were wrong with Hatfield's claim. One, a survey does not hand over a title to a land. Two, a clear title to this land can be traced back to 1795, belonging to the Klein family. This was only the beginning of the trouble between Hatfield and the Kleins. The next time there was trouble stirred up about the land was in 1867, when Hatfield decided to illegal timber the land. The Klein brothers could not stop Hatfield from trespassing on their land. This led to a formal meeting of sorts in 1869 at the mouth of Grapevine Creek. According to Jacob Jr., Ance Hatfield tried to pry the land away from the brothers by using force at the end of a gun. Perry backed down and sold his half to Hatfield. Jacob Jr. stood his ground and refused. By 1870, Hatfield had built a cabin on the land and moved his family to this new location from Make Creek. In 1871, the land that Hatfield had wrenched from Perry Klein still had not been paid for. However, it is thought that Hatfield bullied Perry Klein to trade properties instead of paying for the land. Klein would not only give up the land he was currently living on, but he would give up the land that was part of his inheritance. Hatfield would give Klein in exchange a piece of land that was located on the Pike County, Kentucky side of Tug River. In 1872, the Hatfield clan had moved once again and was now taking up residence in the Klein homestead. Hatfield takes the Kleins to court. Now, this is very interesting. Anderson Hatfield filed a case against Perry Klein in 1872 over a disputed property line. This case would continue until 1876 or 1877, depending on which versions of the events that you adhere to. Here is what happened in the case. It is supposed that Anderson Hatfield could not read or write, or could even survey land. However, this did not stop him from surveying the land that he had gotten from Perry Klein. Furthermore, he would testify in a sworn deposition that he ignored all the land property lines that the state of West Virginia had on their county maps and decided to make his own property lines. After he did this, he filed the lawsuit. The one version of this case states that Anderson Hatfield won the case in an out-of-court settlement with Perry Klein in 1876. However, this claim is disputed in court documents, which claims that the case continued into 1877. During this case, to settle the confusion over the property boundary, a court ordered a survey of the land by a court-appointed surveyor in 1877. After the survey was done, the case basically was dismissed because Anderson Hatfield had failed to continue the action of the court. Basically, Hatfield dropped the case without dropping the case formally. Sometime after the case was finished, Anderson Hatfield subdivided the land and gave his sons, Johnson and Cap, homesteads of their own. Anderson Hatfield would continue to live and conduct the business of the feud on the land at the Grapevine Creek site until bounty hunters came to town. It is interesting that these same bounty hunters were sent after the Hatfield clan by none other than Perry Cline. In the middle of 1888, Hatfield would move away from Grapevine Creek to settle in a much safer area. Perry Cline versus James Vance Sr. This information comes from the research done by Deborah Autry, as talked about in the source named Truth About Perry Cline's Involvement in the Feud. Basically, when boiled down, on October 30th, 1872, Perry Cline bought 2 plots of land from the two Daniels families. This land was located on the banks of the Tug River on the Pike County, Kentucky side. 3 years later, in 1875, Cline sold these lands to James Vance Sr. for $1,200 to be paid in 3 separate installments of $400 each. The first installment was paid, leaving a balance of $800. Before the next 2 installments were given to Cline, Vance sold the property to William Daniels for $1,500. Fearing that Vance would not pay Cline the remaining balance, a lawsuit was filed. In this lawsuit, Cline attempted to have the $800 taken away from the sale of the property to be given to him for the remaining balance owed. It is not clear if Cline won his suit or not. Land conclusion, and a huge thank you. We can well understand why there was anger and frustration over the land. Before this point, we had no idea what was going on in the land in question. To our minds, the Hatfield clan was just taking timber that did not belong to them. We had no idea of the depth that this whole matter would encompass. Now, we wish to tip our hats to and give a huge credit to the Cline Family Association, who are the descendants of Peter Cline. Without their endless research into the land deeds and their other documentation, the truth of the matter would never have been shown the light of day. We cannot express enough our thanks to these wonderful people and encourage everyone to read their blog. We didn't cover everything that they did, just the part that made us go, "What? Oh, wow." This goes to show that before you purchase land, do your due diligence so that you don't get scammed. And we have to say that their blog really did shed a lot of light on the topic of why there was a possibility that Anderson Hatfield was right and Perry Cline did have an axe to grind against him. And for Perry Cline's part of the story, we can understand why he had such hard feelings and can't help but wonder if it did not spur him forward in seeking justice for the McCoy family. The Hatfield and McCoy connection. At this very moment in the feud, there were actually 3 controversial people that comes into play. It really never fails to amaze us just how much information comes out over time. And we get to basically redo our look at one of the most controversial characters of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Everyone knows that Perry Cline and Bad Frank Phillips were already in the mix, but now we have a third, and he was hidden. And we have to ask, why? The following information comes from the blog post Lies, Damn Lies, and Few Tales. We will read this information and see what we can glean from it. Quote, Devil John is left out of all the feud books, even though he was deeply involved in the feud's second phase in 1887 to 1888. West Virginia State Senator John Shepherd, in his letter to Governor Simon B. Buckner, wrote that John Wright rode beside Bad Frank Phillips at the head of Kentucky's gang that invaded West Virginia. Shepherd's claim is buttressed by the testimony of John C. Hatfield, and that of the man who turned state evidence against John C. in his 1899 trial for the murder of Alifair McCoy during the New Year's 1888 raid. Both men testified that Devil John Wright led a gang into Logan County in September 1888, only days after Governor Buckner announced the increased rewards on the Hatfields.
John C. testified that he and the other indicted Logan Countyans, quote, took to the hills, unquote, hiding from Devil John, who was, quote, trying to capture us people, unquote. Devil John had his own feuds at various times, the most spectacular being against the Clabe Jones family. The Wrights and the Joneses sometimes passed each other in the night on their way to raid the other's territory. Devil John and his pal, Bad Talton Hall, once killed 4 men in a gunfight in Floyd County, Kentucky. Unquote. What we know about Wright so far. Devil John Wesley Wright is named in a couple of our feuds, outlaw biographies as a background character, and is a huge part of the Jones Hall Wright feud, and is an associate of John Mayo. We also know that he was a U.S. Marshal for a time, working closely with the Consolidation Coal Company. We can only surmise that through his connection with Consol and being an associate of John C.C. Mayo, that Wright's controversial actions were basically covered up or condoned by those in power. There are some articles out there that John Wright worked for the Pinkerton Agency. If this was so, John Wright's position as a U.S. Marshal would be in question. We found this law in the blog about John Wesley Wright in the Yapot source, as the Anti-Pinkerton Act was a law passed by the U.S. Congress in 1893 because of the Homestead Strike of 1892. According to this act, quote, an individual employed by the Pinkerton Detective Agency or similar organization may not be employed by the government of the United States or the government of the District of Columbia, unquote. The Anti-Pinkerton Act was a law passed by the U.S. Congress in 1893 to limit the government's ability to hire strikebreakers. It is contained within 5 U.S.C. 3108 and specifically restricts the government and the District of Columbia from hiring employees of the Pinkerton or similar organizations, unquote. Wright is also considered to be a controversial character in Letcher County history, as his son, Chid Wright, claims that John killed 16 men in his biography, but he may have killed as many as 28, and some sources state 30 men. There are also historical rumblings that Wright was also involved in the Pound Gap Massacre, but we could find no direct links to this event in his history yet. As for the Wright's connection with Frank Phillips, we could find no evidence of this in the newspaper articles or other documentation. Only the letter from Senator Shepard is the only remaining evidence of this connection. This letter also tells us that Wright was connected to 4 men being murdered in Floyd County. Using the newspaper accounts, we could not find any direct proof of who all of the 4 men were that were supposedly killed in Floyd County by Wright. Neither could we find any report of 4 Hatfield and McCoy feudists being killed. However, there is a possibility that the Floyd County men that Hall is known to have killed would have also been attributed to Wright. Because, according to the writings of Clabe Jones, both men were closely linked together and did ride together on several occasions. Talton Hall. We have done an extensive biography of Thomas Talton Hall in both his story and from the Jones Hall Wright feud. In one of the stories, we find that Talton Hall was connected to the murders of Mac Hall, Ab Little, and Frank Sayers. All 3 of these men were from Floyd County. Charged and jailed for the murders of Mac Hall and Ab Little were Miles Bates, George Johnson, and William J. Bates. There was an arrest warrant out for Talton Hall, but he would never face charges in a court of law, as Hall would be charged, convicted, and hanged for the murder of Norton, Virginia Deputy Hilton a short time later. The murder of Frank Sayers would never enter an actual court of law, even though there was evidence that Hall had killed him for his wife, money, and property. As for the 4th man who was supposedly murdered by Hall in Floyd County, we could not find the name as of yet. Also, we are not sure that there is a connection between the 3 men to the Hatfield and McCoy feud. However, as with everything concerning the feuds, as more time goes forward, the more information that gets put out there. What is the most confusing historical thing about the story of Taunton Hall is his connection to the Pound Gap Massacre. Hall had no direct or indirect connection to this event. However, his arrest, trial, conviction, incarceration, and hanging were all told within the story. Which is wild because, again, he had nothing to do with that event whatsoever. For more information about John Wright and Taunton Hall, please check out our playlist about Todd Hall, the Jones Hall Wright feud, the autobiography of Caleb Jones, the Killing Rock, and the Pound Gap Massacre.
Chapter 8 has a lot of information and missing pieces in it concerning the attack on the McCoy cabin. While this account is very detailed, some of the so-called facts in the article have been since disproven. This account is rather lengthy, and we know that many will want to raise their hands when they hear the tale in the Sun newspaper. We were the first to do so ourselves. However, all we ask is that everyone hang on, because we will break this apart. We will be reading from the chapter directly with a discussion to follow next week. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The reading of the newspaper article. Quote, Chapter 8, A Woman Murdered in Cold Blood. On New Year's night of this year, there were at Randall's house, besides himself and wife, his son Calvin, and Roseanne's little boy, Melvin, all of whom were in the westerly end of the house. In the other end were Alifair, Adley, and Fanny McCoy, daughters of Randolph, and the young women grown, besides little Cora, the orphan daughter of Talbot. Shortly after midnight, they were awakened by a gang of Hatfields, who called on old Randall to surrender or they would burn his house over his head. The gang was headed by Uncle Jim Vance, who had, hitherto, kept out of trouble and was got into it by a circumstance which illustrates the morals of these mountaineers very well, but the story of which must be told at another time. Uncle Jim's sister was the wife of Bad Ants. With Vance were Cap Hatfield, Johnsy Hatfield, Bob Hatfield, a younger son of Cap, Elliot Hatfield, son of Ellison, Ellison Mounts, an illegitimate son of the dead deacon, French Ellis, Tom Gillespie, and Tom Mitchell. Gillespie and Elliot Hatfield were posted as sentinels up and down the road. The other 7 men attacked the house. Old Randall made no answer to the demand to surrender, and an effort was made to break in his door. The door was barred, and the gang attacked the other end, where the girls were, and broke in their door and jumped back, lest the man should be inside and shoot it out. Alifair, the eldest girl, went to the door and told them no man was in there. Quote, Stir a light, quote, ordered Jim Vance, and Alifair went to the fireplace and tried to build a fire. But the coal was out, and there was neither wood nor match to light the fire. Alifair returned to the door and told the men why she could not make no fire. The men broke out in a torrent and profanity, and Cap Hatfield swore that he would shoot her if she did not at once make a fire in the fireplace. She recognized his voice and said, holding up her hands and bursting into tears, quote, Cap, I can't. I would, indeed I would, if I could. You wouldn't shoot a woman who never did you any harm, would you? Unquote. Quote, What the hell are you doing parleying with her for? Unquote, yelled Uncle Jim. Quote, God blank her. Make no more account of her than you would of a man. Shoot her. Blank her. Unquote. Cap raised his gun, But Ellison Mounts had his gun already at his shoulder and shot the girl down as she stood there in her nightgown. The ball entered just over her left breast, and she fell back dead with only a moan. Then one of the gang, who had found a bag of cotton between the two houses, brought a handful of it, set it on fire, and threw it into the room. By its light they could see that no man was concealed in the room, and they were, therefore, safe to put all of their forces on the other end. A part of them had already been engaged there. They had shot the southerly door to pieces, so that a determined rush would have broken it open. But a rush of that sort was what no Hatfield had the courage to make. One of the gang, however, brought burning cotton and piled it against the door. But Mrs. McCoy had been churning the night before and had 4 gallons of buttermilk in the churn. The old man took a tin cup and, sitting near the door, dipped milk onto the fire with one hand and held a revolver ready to shoot with the other. Then they tried to fire the roof. Tom Mitchell climbed up the logs with one hand over the top log, held a blazing torch against the clapboards. The old man saw the hand, and putting his revolver as close to it as possible, shot all 4 fingers off close to the knuckle. Cap tells gleefully to this day how Tom, quote, cried like a baby over the loss of his fingers, unquote. Calvin had not been idle all this time. He had mounted to the attic and, kicking off the gable boards and here and there a clapboard from the roof, had opened a porthole through which he got several shots at the gang. One ball passed lengthwise through Ellison Mount's left forearm soon after he had killed Eliphaz, but it was from a 32 caliber rifle and did not make a permanent injury. However, Calvin drove the gang under the porch on the south side of his end of the building and between the buildings, and there they were secure. Calvin kicked off the roof boards and strove to remove a part of the roof of the porch, but in vain. From the retreat under the porch, the gang kept up a fire on the door and at the same time kept applying torches to the house roof, while 1 or 2 others fired at the roof successfully at the end where the girls were, and it began to get very warm for Calvin. While the men were fighting, the old mother of the murdered girl had taken advantage of the lull in the shooting to slip out of the door facing the road, to go around where the girls were. She had heard that the other girls screamed that Eliphaz had been shot. As she went out of the door, Chauncey Hatfield fired at a form on the bed, and the bullet cut the quilt over his own son. This story is told by the Hatfield crowd as one of the jokes of the feud. It would have been a good one on Chauncey, Cap says, if he had killed his own bastard. Mrs. McCoy started around the door of the other part of the house. As she passed the space between the houses, Jim Vance ordered her back with an oath and raised his gun with a threat to shoot her. Quote, I saw it was the wrong end for that, unquote, Mrs. McCoy said when telling of it. Quote, and kept on, but he struck me in the side with it and knocked me down. It broke 2 ribs. Pretty soon I got on my hands and knees. I felt so weak I couldn't get up, and so crawled on. Someone with a pistol got before me. Quote, for the Lord's sake, let me go to my girl, unquote, I said. Quote, get back, damn you, or I'll kill you, unquote, he said. Quote, oh, I said, she's dead. For the love of the Lord, let me go to her, unquote. And then I put up my hand. I could almost touch her feet as she lay there, and I could see her blood where it had run out of the door. Quote, oh my God, unquote. In her grief, in telling of the horrors of that night, the mother forgets what happened to herself as she put out her hand. The man who stopped her was Chauncey Hatfield, and he struck her a blow with his revolver on the head that drove the hammer into the skull and left her senseless. They supposed she was dead. It was not long after this that the fire drove Calvin from the attic. He said to the old man that he should strive to reach a corn crib about 100 yards away across the yard to the northwest. From that point, he could cover the retreat of the old man, and both might then cross the fork and reach the woods. With a box of cartridges in one hand and his rifle in the other, Calvin leaped, and from the door he ran across the yard. As he cleared the corner of the house where the gang could see him, they opened fire. It was a regular war, and it roused the old man into action, and he followed. Calvin was by this time 75 yards away, in the shadow of some trees, and almost safe, but a bullet pierced his brain, and he fell dead unknown to even those who shot him. The gang had spread out from the retreat at the west end of the house, where they had gone as Calvin came down to the ladder. As the old man sprang out, he saw them before him, while they did not notice him. He leveled a double-barreled shotgun at Chauncey Hatfield and shot him in the right shoulder, and Chauncey fell. Then he saw Tom Mitchell before him and fired. The shot pierced Tom's cartridge belt and entered the flesh at the abdomen, but the wounds, on account of the thickness of the belt, were of little account. Then the firing at the old man began, and he ran as best as he could and escaped untouched. He reached the corn crib, and from there passed on up the mountain on the other side of the fork to the woods. He was dressed in a shirt and drawers only, and it was a very cold night. Had he not been lucky enough to find some hogs sleeping against some hay in an old barn on the next farm, he probably would have died from exposure. He routed the hogs out and got into the bed they had left. After the men left the house and the firing ceased, the girls Addie and Fanny, finding the roof falling in, ventured to leave the house. They saw the gang just turning a point of the mountain on the road to Tug River. Then they picked up their dead sister and, followed by the little orphan Cora, they dragged the body to the edge of the woods and to the southeast of the house, where they built a fire and cowed down by it. Their mother had by this time revived enough to crawl after them as they drew the body of Alifair away from the burning building. Little Melvin ran out at the time his grandfather did and was clutching the old man's leg, but he tripped and fell at the door, and then crawled away around another corner of the house and was unnoticed. The women remained by the fire until morning, without clothes or assistance. On the morning of January 2nd, the family was cared for and sent to Pikeville. The old man and Jim and Sam came on ahead. The neighbors prepared Alifair and Calvin for their grave, and buried them on the mountainside with their dead brothers. The graves are plainly seen from the road. They are surrounded by an old rail fence after the fashion of the country, and shaded by a peach tree that will not live to bear the fruit of another year. The old farm is left to a tenant, and is rapidly going to ruin. Unquote. The reading of the first correspondence. Quote, Wheeling Daily Intelligencer, January 9th, 1888. Quote, a terrible story of a family feud and murder. The blank between West Virginians and Kentuckians, the Hatfield and McCoy vendetta, the murder of the McCoy family, a desperate gang. Cincinnati, Ohio, January 8th. The Enquirer prints the following special from Catlettsburg, Kentucky. Intelligence has just reached this place of one of the most wanton and diabolical cases of arson and murder ever committed in the state of Kentucky. This scene is on Blackberry Fork of Pond Creek in Pike County. The crime is the outgrowth of an old feud and is laid at the door of the notorious Hatfields and their gang. About 5 years ago, there was an election held on the creek, and one of the Hatfields came across the river from West Virginia, and during the day engaged in an altercation with one of the McCoys. Two of the McCoy brothers came to his rescue and fatally stabbed Hatfield. Hatfield was taken home, and his relatives swooped down on the McCoy boys, took them captives, and held them prisoners until Ellison Hatfield, whom they had stabbed, died. When the Hatfields conveyed the three McCoy boys to the scene of the altercation, stripped them, tied them to a pawpaw bush, and shot them to death, and left their bodies in that position. Since that time, a regular war has waged between the Hatfields and their gang, who reside in Logan County, West Virginia, and the McCoys and their gang, who reside in Pike County, Kentucky, all in the same neighborhood, the East Fork of the Sandy River dividing them. So much for the beginning of the trouble, and now for the last, most horrible scene. A few nights since, the Hatfield party visited the residence of Randall McCoy and set fire to the house. Alifera, his eldest daughter, was the first to open the door and make her appearance. And in the glaring light, she was shot dead by the fiends outside, who were concealed. His son Calvin next appeared, and he was shot dead. His wife made her appearance in escaping from the burning building and was shot through the head, and although she was still alive, at last accounts, she will die. Randall McCoy escaped from the burning building with his shotgun, and although a volley was discharged from him as he escaped unhurt, and opened fire upon the attacking party. He is known to have killed one of the gang by the name of Chambers, and, it is said, shot Cap Hatfield in the shoulder, and putting the rest to flight. So ends this chapter. There are rewards aggregating $2,700 offered by the state of Kentucky for the arrest of the Hatfield and their delivery to the jailer of Pike County for the murder of the three McCoy boys, but no one seems anxious to make an attempt to take them as they are strongly barricaded in the wilds of West Virginia. One of their number constantly stands guard, and they defy the authorities. But retributive justice is likely to follow, as their last acts have stirred up the whole section. This gang of outlaws have killed Mr. McCoy's wife, three of his sons, and one daughter, besides burning his house, leaving him only three daughters. But if the Hatfields were ever taken, dead or alive, the men who undertake this job will experience some fun, as this set of West Virginia toughs is a determined and desperate band. Unquote. Taking a look. Well, it seems that a lot of things were left out of this. The attack of the Daniels cabin was left out. The death of Jeff McCoy was absent here, and the death of William Stanton. They are just all simply brushed off as a continued fighting between the two families. But let us leave all of that behind for just a moment, as we have already discussed those events. The main focus of this article seems to be the burning of the McCoy cabin. We really are not given the reason why this event occurred by this reading of the event. However, it does seem that they did cover the account of the death of Alifair and Calvin, but they mistakenly said that Sarah McCoy was also shot in the head. She wasn't. However, she was severely beaten to the point that it shortened her life by many years. We also have a bit of premonition with this correspondence, as bad Frank Phillips would not have an easy time bringing in the Hatfield gang. It would take some time and an eventual Supreme Court case to bring them before a court of law. While we usually go in deeper about the events that happened in our stories, the story of the burning down of the McCoy cabin was pretty straightforward. Calvin and Alifair McCoy were killed on January 1st, 1888. However, in a lot of the stories, the murder of Calvin is often overlooked, and it would be the murder of Alifair that would stir up trouble in both Kentucky and West Virginia. We are pretty sure that the events surrounding the burning of the McCoy cabin was not accurate. However, we are pretty sure that the article did hit the high spots pretty well from everything that has come out about that night so far in all of the sources. In later videos, we will discuss the calls for the state of Kentucky to step in and bring in the Logan regulators, and the response from Kentucky about the whole feud. But for now, we will begin with Chapter 9, with the reading of the Sun newspaper. Quote, Chapter 9, Raiding the Hatfields. The murderer of Alifair aroused Pike County as it had not been aroused since the Civil War. The mountaineers have chivalry, if not courage, and they were ready after a fashion to avenge the murder of a woman. Out of a host of volunteers, Frank Phillips selected 23 men, and early on the morning of January 6th, rode out of Pikeville to raid Logan County for the indicted Logan regulators. They reached Aunt Hatfield's home on the bank of Tug River, opposite the mouth of Peter Creek, at night. Of course, Aunt was not at home, but the women and children were, and they were terribly alarmed. Jim McCoy and 5 others stayed there that night, one keeping guard all the time, of course. Next morning, very early, the mob went down to Thacker Creek, where Shane Farrell lives, and took him along to prevent him from giving an alarm. 3 miles up above Thacker lived Uncle Jim Vance, but when they reached the house, no one was there. It is a remarkable fact that a trail of blood from the burned home of old Randall led down to Tug River, was found again on the east side, and ended at Jim Vance's yard. The Kentuckians were able to trace the trail on the 6th quite easily. From Vance's, the mob started to go over on Mate Creek, following up a branch that was a shorter way than a regular road. At the head of the branch, and on the right of the gap of the mountain, they met Mrs. Vance coming down with an empty pail in her hand. She had been carrying breakfast up to Uncle Jim and to Cap, who had slept in that mountain. As she saw the mob, she turned and shouted, quote, "Here they come," unquote. Quote, "How many?" unquote, asked Uncle Jim. Quote, "About 40, I reckon," unquote. During this talk, the Kentuckians had charged up past the woman. Uncle Jim yelled, quote, "Halt," and then shouted, "Charge 'em, boys, rally, boys, charge 'em," unquote, and at the same time began to shoot. The orders, except the first, were bluff, for there were no boys there to rally except Cap Hatfield, who flunked and ran like a sheep with dogs after it. He did not even shoot one shot. But Uncle Jim was too old to run, and made a virtue of necessity. He dodged behind a locust stub, still several feet high and 8 inches thick, and taking aim at Frank Phillips, who led the mob, fired. Phillips is a remarkably cool-headed desperado. Just as the old man got his gun to face Phillips, dropped to the ground, and the bullet passed harmlessly over his head. Then he jumped up and fired as he ran forward to gain the shelter of a tree. But the old man fired again and again. Phillips dodged. This seems almost incredible, but the story is told by both parties. After the shot, Phillips gained the shelter of a big oak and tried to get a shot at the old man from it. As he peered around, he saw the old man had the drop on him and dodged back just in time. The bullet knocked a shower of bark into Philip's face. But at the same instant, Phillips levied his gun and fired square at the center of the stump that concealed the old man. The stump was partly rotten, and the ball passed through it, striking Uncle Jim's cartridge belt and knocking him away from his shelter. Before the old man could recover himself, Phillips had pumped in a fresh cartridge and shot him through the body. Uncle Jim dropped to the ground behind a log, and Phillips ran forward, supposing the man was done for. In truth, he was fatally hurt, but he was game yet. He had drawn a revolver as he fell, and before Phillips had taken 2 steps, he saw the old man peering over the log, holding the pistol with both hands. Uncle Jim was afflicted with a sort of St. Vitus dance that made his eyes roll and his whole frame shake about. Yet, he was accounted the best pistol shot in Logan County. Phillips dropped the moment he saw the old man, and the old man shrunk down a bit too. That was a mistake, for it enabled Phillips to aim his rifle where the old man's head must appear as he raised, to look for Phillips. In a moment, the gray hairs on his forehead rose above the log, and Phillips fired. The ball knocked off the old man's hat 10 feet away and scattered his brains over the leaves for a yard around. The old lady, his wife, saw him killed. Walking up to his body, she said, quote, "Poor old man, he's dead," unquote, and then walked away. Uncle Jim had neither been a faithful nor a kind husband, and the widow shed no tears. The killing of Uncle Jim ended that raid. The Kentucky mob did not develop a relish for blood. They returned to Kentucky, but on January 9th started on another raid. This time, they went to Beech Creek in Logan County. They reached the house of Justice Wall Hatfield at noon, and leaping their horses over the fence, charged on the house. Wall, instead of jumping for his gun, ran to the door to see what was the racket, as he supposed, with the cows. Jim McCoy covered him with a rifle, and the justice threw up his hands. In the house, the mob found Doc and Sam Mayhorn, who were wanted for killing the three McCoy boys. This made three prisoners. The mob went on up the creek, however, and found Client Mayhorn and Andy Varney, and then went over on another branch and got L.D. McCoy. Andy Varney tried to escape, but Sam McCoy and Dave Stratton ran him down instead of shooting him, according to the custom. The third and last raid was made beginning on January 16th. There were 33 men in the mob. On the 18th, they reached West Virginia, opposite Peter Creek, and rode down along the bank of the Tug River to the mouth of Grapevine Creek. Here lived Captain Hatfield. Jim McCoy was in advance of the rest of the mob, who had to ride along single file, of course on account of the road being narrow. His horse was restive, and when within a short distance of the creek, Jim let out to go ahead on the run. Rounding a little spur of the mountain, Jim found himself riding square at 13 of the Logan regulators, who were in Cap's yard, gun in hand, waiting for the Kentuckians. Jim tried to rein in his horse, but at an instant the regulators began firing, and the beast danced with fear. The dancing probably saved Jim's life, for it prevented fair aim. Now, although no one else was in sight, the regulators knew that others were behind Jim, and so stepped off onto one side, where they could get shelter behind a fence. Meantime, Jim managed to get off of his horse and quiet the beast, although the bullets were whistling on all sides. Then Jim coolly laid his gun on the ground, pulled off his overcoat, which was too tight for him, and placing it on the saddle, turned the horse loose. Then he picked up his gun, walked deliberately to the fence corner, and taking aim over it, fired. He brought his man down with the first shot. The man was Bill Dempsey, and at that other 12 regulators turned and ran like sheep, with Cat Hatfield leading the way, although no other Kentuckian had come in sight save Bud McCoy, and he had been shot down by a bullet in his shoulder. The Kentuckians gathered in Cap's yard, but could at first find no one there, although Jim, who did not go into the yard, had said he had shot one man. But a trail of blood was found that led into the shuck pen. There they found Bill Dempsey, shot through the body. Quote, "What is your name?" unquote, said Frank Phillips. Quote, "Bill Dempsey," unquote, he said, holding up his hands. Quote, "I am not armed, gentlemen, and am dying now. Please don't shoot me any more. Don't, unquote. The last words were uttered as he saw Phillips draw a revolver. Several of the mob saw the revolver too, and jumped to catch it, but they were too late. Phillips shot the man through the head. That act ended the raiding business. It was especially bad for the Kentuckians, for Dempsey was there as a lawful police officer to arrest raiding parties. But the raids had affected the Hatfields much as the deeds of the regulators had previously affected the McCoys, only worse. They immediately abandoned their farms and moved over to Island Creek, in the neighborhood of Logan Courthouse, and here they are now. Johnsey is in Colorado. Unquote. The reading of the Wheeling Register. Wheeling Register, January 26, 1888. Border Vendetta, the Hatfield side of the Logan War. The McCoys again the aggressors. A letter from the seat of trouble. How Dempsey was killed. The Kentucky gang was resisting arrest. Special telegram to the Register. Charleston, West Virginia, January 25th. Today's mail brings more information from Logan County concerning the trouble growing out of the Hatfield McCoy trouble in Pike County, Kentucky. In Logan County, West Virginia, Senator J.B. Floyd received a letter from Logan Courthouse this evening from his brother, which fully explains the erroneous account of the last fight between the Kentucky outlaws and the West Virginia officers, which occurred Saturday last. It was not the Hatfield gang, as the Inquirer of the 24th has it, who was concerned in the fight, but a posse of men armed with the authority of the law, through the sheriff of Logan County, who made a raid on the Kentucky gang, who were known and charged with the late murder of Old Man Vance on the West Virginia soil. It must be remembered those outlaws had invaded West Virginia soil, bent on murder and destruction. The writer of the letter was a member of the posse of the Logan County officers and knows what he is writing about. The letter is under the date of January 22nd, 1888. Governor Wilson has been in telegraphic communication with Governor Buckner of Kentucky, and is likely, if some steps are not taken by the Kentucky government to prevent further invasion by the crowd from Pike County, the governor of this state will deem it necessary to adopt some means for the protection of the people of Logan County. Mr. Floyd's correspondent says, quote, "We are about to get into a war with the Kentucky gang who killed James Vance some days ago. Warrants were issued for the arrest of some 6 of the gang who committed the murder and were placed in the hands of Constable J.R. Thompson to be executed, and he summoned a guard of 13 men to make the arrests. We were over the mouth of Grapevine in this county, and there we were fired upon by about 30 men with Winchester rifles. We were in an open field, and the balls just held around us until we charged on them. When the firing began, Henry Thompson and I were in front of our horses. We all jumped from our horses and returned the fire with our Winchesters, and the firing kept up for about 30 minutes, when we started for some trees about 175 yards away. At this time, they fired another volley and killed one of our men, William Dempsey, shooting him 3 times. They were behind a fence all the time, and we could see nothing but the heads of their gang. Bud McCoy was killed, and another man was wounded, whose name I do not know. They all had Winchester rifles and said they had started to Logan Courthouse to take Ellis Hatfield and burn the town. 3 of their horses were killed during the fight. You must go and see the governor at once and have a stop put to those desperadoes coming over here and killing men and robbing them after they are killed. The people of the county are going to hold a mass meeting here tomorrow, asking the governor to send men over to put a stop to this thing. If the state would furnish us 100 Winchesters and plenty of ammunition, we would not need the men. See the governor as soon as you get this, and let us know what can be done. I can tell you that I heard many a Winchester ball pass my head. It is almost a young war over here. People are laying out from their homes on account of those Kentucky desperadoes. See to this matter at once, and let me hear from you. Signed, W.P. Floyd." Unquote. 3 sides to every story. There is a saying about the truth of a story. There is side 1, side 2, and somewhere in the middle lies the third side, which is the truth. For many years, we have heard the Kentucky side of the Battle of Grapevine Creek. That bad Frank Phillips and his deputies crossed over into West Virginia to arrest the wayward Logan regulators. And that may be so. But on the other swing of the pendulum, we have the Hatfield family that feels that they are being personally hunted and attacked, that they are not receiving their legal due process that was due to them. So, which side would be correct?
Did Kentucky have the right to try to rein in the Logan regulators, or did West Virginia? And if it was West Virginia, why were they not arresting anyone at this point in the story? These are unanswered questions left to us by history. But perhaps one day we will have an answer. But for now, we need to look at this part of the feud with an unbiased lens, as both sides felt that they were justified in their actions. But one has to wonder if either side really were. The People's Petition. Now, we usually add commentary to our stories, but we felt that the petition and the response to it needed no commentary, as they are mostly self explanatory. These were the actions on the West Virginia side of the feud. Wheeling Register, January 28, 1888. Kentucky outlaws, recruited from their last raid into West Virginia, and encamped along the border. The story told by citizens of Logan County, a petition presented to Governor Wilson. Troops desired. Special telegram to the Register. Quote, Charleston, West Virginia, January 27th. William P. Floyd and J. A. Shepard of Logan County arrived here this evening for the purpose of presenting a petition and resolutions from the citizens of Logan County. Mr. Floyd was among the officers who were fired upon on the 22nd by Frank Phillips and his Kentucky gang. His description of the battle is very interesting and a lively one. They report nothing new since the last trouble. The citizens of Logan are very much disturbed, and business along the border is practically suspended. One of the largest lumber dealers on Tug River has abandoned the business for the present, and these gentlemen predict financial ruin to the country if the outrages are not abated. The visitors say the latest information from the border is to the effect that the Kentucky people have been largely recruited and are now number over 100 and are camped along the river bank. It is said that they are backed up in their efforts to invade Logan County and capture the Hatfields by the county officers of Pike County and must have the moral support of the Kentucky government since their outrages were so bold and numerous. They are supplied with ammunition and provisions from the county seat of Pike. Mr. Ship of Logan, who is here now, says that it is the unanimous wish of the people of Logan for both sides to place troops on the border and suppress the law-breaking tendencies on both sides along the border, and when the trouble is quelled, for each state to quietly investigate the matter and exchange those who are wanted on either side. These gentlemen claim that a few persons of this state, in fact, but one or two are needed in Kentucky to subvert the ends of justice, while at least 20 men will be wanted for the killing of the old man Vance, Dempsey, and others. The governor is considering the papers presented from Logan and will probably take some action tomorrow. Governors Wilson and Buckner will have been in communication, and it is likely that there will be consort of action between the two governors. The Kanawha riflemen promptly tendered their services to the governor today, but the governor said that he thought it would be unnecessary to send troops. Unquote. Governor Wilson's response. Quote, Willing Register, January 30th, 1888. Called out. An order for troops on the Kentucky border. Governor Wilson takes action. Auburn and Gulf guards go to the seat of war. Protection for Logan County against the McCoys and their band of ruffians. Governor Buckner's probable action. Another account of the last bloody action. Special telegram to the Register. Charleston, West Virginia, January 29th. The West Virginia militia have been ordered to quell the border war. Governor Wilson's last this afternoon sent the following order to Adjutant General E. L. Woods. Charleston, January 29th. Sir,
it appearing that a combination of armed and lawless persons from the state of Kentucky had for weeks past been making incursions into the county of Logan, this state, and had murdered two of its citizens thereof and a deputized officer of the law while in the discharge of his official duty, and that such incursions still continue, and that said combination endangers the peace and safety of the people and obstructs the execution of the laws, and is too powerful to be suppressed by the civil authorities. Therefore, you will immediately order Colonel R.H. Freer to report to you at Charleston not later than Tuesday night next, 31st instant, with 60 men, 30 each from the Auburn Guards and Golf Guards, for duty and for further orders. Signed, E. W. Wilson, Governor, to E. L. Woods, Adjutant General. The governor, after due consideration of the resolutions and petitions from the people of Logan County and from further advices, decided today to place troops on the border in Logan County between Kentucky and West Virginia. The information telegraphed the register that over 100 of the Kentucky Crown were encamped on Tug River is confirmed and is the reason for the governor's action. The threats made by Kentucky Crown and the McCoys are bloodthirsty in the extreme. They have threatened to kill more prominent citizens of Logan and propose to proceed to Logan Courthouse and burn the town. The governor did not call out the Kanawha riflemen for the reason that they had not mustered in. The men under Colonel Freer have been mustered in the longest and are the most experienced. Only 30 of each company under Colonel Freer were ordered out. The order of the Adjutant General E. L. Wood was sent to Colonel Freer this afternoon at 5 o'clock. The governor says that he will order more men from the old companies already organized, if necessary. It is understood that Governor Wilson has requested the governor of Kentucky to take like action in placing of troops on his side of the river. Logan Mass Meeting. A mass meeting of the citizens of Logan County was held on January 23rd, at which a series of resolutions were adopted. After referring to the feud, the resolution says, whereas says feud or trouble is likely to involve innocent people and their property and cause them great trouble, and whereas it has already cost the lives of two innocent men, and the civil authorities of this county were unable to cope with the armed forces which have already invaded our county, and whereas the civil authorities of this county have attempted to check the invasion of said armed forces from Kentucky, which resulted in the death of one of our officer posse and the failure to arrest any of the parties. And whereas we, the people of Logan County, in mass meeting assembled, desiring that the peace should be established and our people relieved from the annoyance and troubles of what seems to be an intestine where, therefore be it. Resolved that we do appeal to the governor of West Virginia and to the governor of Kentucky to furnish sufficient troops to prevent West Virginia from crossing the Tug River on the Kentucky side, and Kentuckians from crossing to the West Virginia side, and that the troops be stationed along the border of said two states, that both governors agree to and with each other as to how this matter is and how it can be settled. Resolved further that we denounce and protest against any and all movements which are calculated to keep up this trouble, and that we will not countenance anything nor any person who agitates this trouble any further. Unquote. Signed, John A. Shepard, Jason H. Stewart, L. H. Thompson, Committee. On motion, the Secretary is directed to make out and furnish the governors of both West Virginia and Kentucky with copies of these proceedings. Anxious for peace. It will be seen from the above that the people of Logan County are very anxious that the trouble be abated, and to that end make the same request for the Kentucky governor as they do of Governor Wilson. The petitioners further say, Quote, the object of this meeting is to consult as to the best means of executing the laws and quieting the troubles between the McCoys of Pike County, Kentucky, and the Hatfields of this county, which has already caused a great deal of trouble and bloodshed, and is likely to involve innocent people and their property, and cause them a great deal of trouble, unless there is some means adopted where it be properly adjusted by the laws of the land. The civil laws of this country direct how this can be done, and it is the object of this meeting to appeal to the civil authorities of both West Virginia and Kentucky to see that these troubles be settled by the Constitution and the civil laws of the land, and not by harsh and barbarous means. It is not our object to make personal references as to what has been done already, but our appeal is that it be settled, and once on account of the future troubles that are likely to grow out of it. Unquote. The last battle. The following account of the battle in Logan County between the sheriff's posse and the McCoy gang is taken from a letter written to Senator John B. Floyd under date of Logan Courthouse, January 25th. Quote, a few days ago, a warrant was issued by a justice of this county for the arrest of Frank Phillips and the McCoys for the killing of James Vance, and placed in the hands of J.R. Thompson, a constable, with the instructions to summon sufficient need of the rest of the story. Unquote. January 30th, 1888. As we have already stated, the citizens of Logan County fired off a petition to Governor Wilson, begging him for help in resolving the feud between the Hatfield and McCoy families. The violence between the two factions was escalating, and it needed to stop as there were fears that innocent families might be caught in the crossfire. A group of citizens traveled to Charleston, West Virginia to meet with Governor Wilson, and we have the report of what transpired in that meeting. Quote, Wheeling Intelligencer, January 30th, 1888. The Vendetta. Military companies tender their aid to protect the citizens of Logan County. Charleston, West Virginia, January 29th. The committee of the citizens from Logan County who arrived here Friday night had a conference with Governor Wilson yesterday. They claim that lives of the persons in that county are in jeopardy, and that the civil authorities are powerless to enforce the law and sustain order, and ask the aid of the state militia. The governor has the matter under advisement and says that while he still hopes that order may be restored without resorting to extraordinary means, he is determined to employ prompt and adequate means to maintain the honor of this state. The Kennewa Riflemen of Charleston and Golf Guards of Ritchie County have tendered their services. A dispatch from Louisville says, Adjutant General Hill this morning telegraphed to the Lexington Guards of Lexington to prepare to go to Pike County to preserve order between the McCoys of that county and the Hatfields of Logan County, West Virginia. This afternoon, he recalled the order with a view of going first personally to investigate the feud between the border clans. Unquote. While Governor Wilson is taking the citizens of Logan County's petition under advisement, it seems that Adjutant General Hill is taking some form of action. Even if that action is to personally go to the area to see what is going on and what needs to be done to resolve the feud between the two families. However, as we shall soon see, Governor Wilson is not sitting still on the issue. February 1st, 1888. Governor Wilson did not sit idle behind his desk. He sent Colonel W. L. Mahon as a commissioner to survey and report to him of the current situation between the two feuding families. The report was published in the newspaper and reads as follows. Quote, Wheeling Intelligencer, February 1st, 1888. From the frontier, the Commissioner's Report. On the condition of affairs in Logan County, the trouble between the Hatfields and McCoys temporarily over. a fresh outbreak may occur. Charleston, West Virginia, January 31st. Colonel W. L. Mahon, the emissary from Governor Wilson, sent to Logan County a week ago to inquire into and report upon the now famous Hatfield and McCoy vendetta, made his report to Governor Wilson today, and it is as follows. Quote, I visited all the Hatfields and found them to be good, law-abiding citizens who have the respect and confidence of everyone in the neighborhood. That while many depredations have been committed and the whole surrounding the country has been in a state of excitement and tumult, bordering on a general young war, peace has again been restored, and the belligerent parties on both sides have disbanded, and no further trouble is anticipated. The strangest part of the whole affair is the fact that the Hatfields and McCoys are related. The recent outbreak seems to have been caused by the parties in Pike County, Kentucky, resurrecting old indictments against the Hatfields, which were found 5 years ago. The Pike County parties went to Frankfort, Kentucky, and had rewards offered for the Hatfields, and came into West Virginia under the guise of officers of the law, when in reality they had no requisition, and arrested, or rather kidnapped, Thomas Chambers, Andrew Varney, Shelley McCoy, D.D. McCoy, Moses, Christian, Samuel, Dee and Pliant Mahon, and Valentine Hatfield, took them over to Kentucky and placed them in the Pike County Jail, where they are still confined. The party, headed by Frank Phillips, fired on and killed Old Man Vance without so much as calling on him to surrender. And there are the same parties who came over into the state and fired upon Constable Thompson and posse, at which time a deputy and another man were killed. The citizens of Logan State, that had any parties other than these sent, been called upon to make the arrest, no blood would have been shed. But the McCoys, who came with Phillips to make the arrest, had sworn to kill the Hatfields, and would have done so after they were disarmed. Peace has been temporarily declared, but it is feared by the law-abiding people of the two counties that hostilities will be renewed before a great while. The trouble began during the war. The Hatfields were in the Confederate Army, and the McCoys were in the Union Army. Unquote. So, according to Colonel W. L. Mahon, if anyone else besides Phillips and the McCoys attempted the arrest, it would have been a peaceful event. While we will never know for sure if this would have been like Mahon supposed, it is highly unlikely that the Hatfields would have given themselves up so easily. After all, they had not turned themselves in for previous crimes. Why should they worry about arrest now? While history does not tell us what exactly caused the ire between the Hatfields and McCoys during the burning of the McCoy cabin, it does seem that this was the final straw in the feud, and now an accounting had to be made. February 2nd, 1888. Enough was enough for Governor Wilson. As we have previously learned through the Commissioner's report, the McCoys were not going to take everything done to them laying down. They were determined that the Hatfield family was going to legally pay for all of the crimes that had been done against the McCoy family. To keep down trouble, Wilson had to do something fast to stop another potential outbreak of violence. We read what actions that Wilson was taking in the following article. Quote, Willing Intelligencer, February 2nd, 1888. The Logan County Vendetta. The citizens of Logan County in mass meeting assembled, claiming that the authorities of the country are powerless to suppress the feud existing between the Hatfields of Logan and the McCoys of Pike County, Kentucky, have petitioned the governor for military aid. The petition sets forth that two citizens, one of whom was a deputized officer of the law in the discharge of his official duty, had been shot down like dogs without provocation. That invasions into our state are still being made by Kentucky outlaws, destroying the peace and endangering the lives of our citizens, and that these incursions are too powerful to be suppressed by the civil authorities. Governor Wilson, after a careful consideration of the matter, has ordered two companies of infantry, the Gulf and Auburn Guards, to report at once at Charleston for duty, and these companies, under the command of Colonel R. H. Freer, will be sent at once to Logan County. The Camden and Clements Guards of Mannington have offered their services to the governor, but they will hardly be needed. Governor Wilson has requested Governor Buckner of Kentucky to send troops to the scene of the trouble on the Kentucky side and has been assured that the civil power of the state will be employed to prevent any further invasion of this state by the lawless bands of Kentucky. The military will render good service to both states by shooting the leaders of the vendetta on both sides. Governor Wilson has probably acted for the best in sending the military to suppress the horrible outrages that have been so common in Logan County of late, and yet it seems strange that the sheriff, with the whole power of the county at his command, should be unable to put down a private feud. Unquote. It seems that the newspaper is really not that kind at all to the sheriff of Logan County, West Virginia. But we must remember that in many states, the office of sheriff is an elected office. It would not be good to turn against those that got you into that position in the first place. War of Extermination. In another article that appeared in the same edition of the Wheeling Intelligencer, we have a special report from Catlettsburg, Kentucky, concerning the feud. Quote, War of Extermination. A special from Catlettsburg, Kentucky, dated January 24th, says, quote, the war of extermination between the Hatfields and McCoys is still going on the wilds of West Virginia. The steamer, Frank Preston, arrived from Pikeville yesterday and brought intelligence of the encounter between the pursuing party and the Hatfields on Saturday. On Thursday last, the capturing party, numbering 20, left Pikeville for Tug River. After crossing the river, when nearing the residence of Cap Hatfield, they came across a woman in the road who was standing picket and who immediately gave the alarm. The capturing party, when turning a point in the road, were fired upon by a squad of 8 from the Hatfield gang. Bud McCoy was shot through the shoulder and dangerously wounded. 2 of the posse were detailed to care for him and take him home. The capturing party immediately returned the fire, and Will Dempsey of the Hatfield gang fell to the ground shot through the bowels. At this juncture, the Hatfields beat a hasty retreat, throwing away their blankets, overcoats, and etc. Posse went up to where Dempsey was, although he was in a dying condition, and begged piteously to be saved as he would not live long. Despite his cries for mercy, the man that killed Jim Vance on the first raid put a gun against Dempsey's head and almost blew it off. At this inhuman and sickening act, one of the pursuing party became angry, left the posse, and returned home. The Hatfields were organizing for a raid over on Peter Creek in Kentucky, the scene of one of their New Year's night deeds, to murder people, burn property, and kill stock. The Peter Creek Guards, 20 strong, have joined the capturing party, which now numbers 40 odd, and are in hot pursuit of the Hatfields. The excitement throughout Pike County, though intense, is increasing daily, as the Hatfields have warned the people that they propose to kill them and burn their property. They have sent word that they propose to burn Pikeville and extradite their 6 comrades now in jail there. The jail is strongly guarded day and night, and pickets are sent out in all directions from the town every night. Judge Wagner, county judge of Pike County, and J. Lee Ferguson, attorney, came down on the Frank Preston from Pikeville en route to Frankfort, where they go to lay the case before the governor and ask him for arms to protect themselves and their property. Later, since setting the above, we learned that the agent sent by Governor Wilson to Logan County has returned to Charleston and reports the war ended, the belligerents having disbanded. The marching orders to the military were, therefore, countermanded. Unquote. It seems that Pikeville was taking the matter of the Hatfields' threats very seriously. When we see pickets here, it's not talking about a picket fence, but basically foxholes and man-made dirt piles that were used as a defensive line against an attack. The people of Pikeville must have been terrified that they were going to be attacked by the Hatfield clan by great numbers. The Pike County judge and accompanying attorney were on their way to Frankfort to ask for military help to safeguard their city. However, it seems that by the time that the commissioner from the state of West Virginia had reached the area, an uneasy calm had been restored. Could this have been because Pikeville made sure that the Hatfields knew that they would not easily be taken as previously thought? A Times article, quote, Wheeler Register, February 2nd, 1888. New developments in the Hatfield McCoy feud. The results of an investigation by a newspaperman, Governor Wilson's actions criticized severely. Quiet that may be followed by a big storm. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, February 1st. The Times this morning contains 5 columns concerning the Hatfield and McCoy feud in Logan County, West Virginia, and Pike County, Kentucky, written by Charles S. Howe, a member of the staff of this paper, who has spent some time at the seat of war, gathering the facts upon which the letter is based. The correspondence is of a most interesting and thrilling nature, and purports to be the first true statement of the affair which has yet appeared. The correspondent says that 20 lives have been sacrificed in the feud, and that women and children were not spared. He alleges that the Hatfield-McCoy troubles, meager reports of which have been current for a month, have been threatening for several days to develop into a serious interstate complications. Governor Butner of Kentucky and Governor Wilson of West Virginia have had portions of the troops of their respective states available for operations on the banks of the Tug River, ostensibly to take care of the interests of these sovereign states. The soldiers, according to last reports, have been ordered back to their homes, but this is no indication that the troubles are ended. The Hatfield-McCoy War, divested of the coloring with which assiduous correspondents have clothed it, and of all the sentiment with which the representatives of the 2 states have invested it, is simply a succession of cowardly murders by day and assassination and house burnings by night. All of the murders have been cruel, heartless, and almost without the shadow of provocation. Given on the one hand, a family with its contingents of the same blood, allied and cemented by a common desire to avenge the imaginary affront, and on the other, another family, small in the matter of allegiance and collateral sympathies, doomed to destruction by the larger one, and the case is stated. Interesting conclusions. Continuing onward with the Times article. Quote, interesting conclusions. Several columns of history relating to the feud follow upon the information derived from reputable sources. And the details of all the murders and outrages and recent capture of some of the participants are given minutely. Nearly all these facts have already been published in a fragmentary way, and the correspondence report confirms them in detail. The most important developments in the correspondence are in the conclusion as follows. The crowning piece of deviltry in connection with the feud was reserved for the night of January 1st, 1888,
when 13 of the Hatfield gang, headed by James Vance, surrounded Paul McCoy's homestead near the mouth of Pond Creek, burned the house with its contents, killed the son and daughter, beat the mother over the head with the butt of a gun till they thought she was dead, and left the little children to die in the cold on the mountainside among the bushes, to which they escaped in their nightclothes. While the house was burning, the father and husband fired 2 shots with a telling effect. 3 new-made graves are to be found in the Hatfield settlement. A number of the gang are known to be wounded. After burying the dead, McCoy removed his family to Pike Courthouse last week. The story was obtained principally from Mr. and Mrs. McCoy, who show unmistakable evidences of the intensity of their sufferings and is fully corroborated by others. No one knows why the fiendish malignity should have been kept up. But once has McCoy attempted to retaliate. That was a few days ago. Even now, no feeling of resentment is manifest. He spoke like a man who has been bent and almost broken by the weight of his afflictions and grief. Quote, I used to be on very friendly terms with the Hatfields before and after the war. We never had any trouble until 6 years ago, unquote. He continued, quote, I hope no more of us will have to die. I'll be glad when it's all over, unquote. The killing of Calvin and Alifera on the night of January 1st became known the next day at the county courthouse. Measures were taken at once to capture or kill a portion of the Hatfields. 20 or 30 men under Deputy Sheriff Trask Phillips crossed the Tug River near Pond Creek in Pike County, Kentucky on January 6th. Within 30 yards of the house, Mrs. Vance hailed Phillips with, quote, Who are you and where are you going? Unquote. Quote, Who are you and where are you going? Unquote, was his rejoinder. Quote, I think they're after you, Pap, unquote, shrieked the bold woman, and a moment later old Vance arose from his concealment behind her. During the shooting which followed, Vance was killed. On the night of January 9th, Phillips and posse arrested Valentine Hatfield, 3 Mayhorn brothers, Tom Chambers and Rue Yancey, Selkirk McCoy, and Moses Christian. Others of the Hatfields were captured in McDowell County, West Virginia, about the same time and landed in Pike County Jail. On January 19th, Sheriff Phillips and posse charged Old Ants and companions, and all fled except for Jim Dumney, who was killed by Jim McCoy, an uncle of Randall McCoy. Mr. Howe then proceeds with his narrative as follows. The prisoners in jail. I saw all of the prisoners this morning in the Pike jail. They are all confined in 2 small cells. The jail is a small one, but it is as well built as any in the country, and all appliances for the detention of the prisoners are as good. The prisoners are good types of their locality. Old Wall Hatfield is a tall, powerful, well-proportioned man. He has iron gray hair and a mustache to match, while a pair of rough, shaggy eyebrows almost conceal his eyes of greenish gray that are forever evading the sick person with whom the owner may be talking. Cool and self-possessed at all times, Wall never allows himself to be led into making any entangling statements. 2 of the 3 Mayhorn brothers confined with him are his son-in-law and are highly spoke of in the matter of bravery and cunning. Mose Christian and old Selkirk McCoy are of the Hatfield gang, but live in McDowell County, West Virginia. The captures are all important, as all are under 3 indictments each for murder. Wall was not engaged in the killing of the McCoy son and daughter on the night of January 1st, nor were the Mayhorns. He advised against it, and is said to have fallen out with his brother Ants in consequence of his refusal to participate. Unquote. Returning to the Times article, quote, suffering for his earnestness. Frank Phillips has made himself so conspicuous in his efforts to capture and suppress the Hatfield gang that he has been removed from his position as deputy sheriff.
The sheriff of Pike County is Basil Hatfield, a connection of the heads of the Hatfield gang, and himself is charged with giving them aid and comfort in removing Phillips and substituting his own son. Phillips, however, has been appointed agent of the governor of Kentucky to recover the Hatfields, for whom requisitions were issued. He says that he will capture them all eventually and do all in his power to bring their punishment. The Hatfields are evidently sick that Phillips is in earnest, as aunts and the sons Cap and Johns have moved into Logan Courthouse, while others have gone across into Virginia until the Pike County authorities shall have had the time to file the indictments against them. The demon of the prosecution. The demon of the prosecution, however, is Perry Cline, the uncle of murdered Jeff McCoy. He is prolific of resources, patient, brave, and untiring. He went into the Hatfield settlement and learned all the facts in retaliation to the murder of his nephew. Tall, gaunt, with long black hair and beard, with the face across which consumption's signature is written, broad and deep, he appears the very aperture of vengeance. Instead of a man trying to appease the angry demands of blood and give peace to a distracted community. Warned by the Hatfields. Recognizing his abilities and fearing his pursuit, the Hatfields sent him the following last August. Logan Courthouse, West Virginia, August 29th, 1887. Perry Cline, Pikeville, Kentucky. My name is Nat Hatfield. I am not a single individual by a good many, and we do not live on Tug River, but we live all over this county. We have been told by men from your county that you and your men are fixing to invade this county for the purposes of taking the Hatfield boys. And now, heir, we, 49 in number at present, do notify you that if you come into this county to take or bother any of the Hatfields, we will follow you to hell or take your hide. And if any of the Hatfields are killed or bothered in any way, we will charge it up to you, and your hide will pay the penalty. We are not bothering you, and neither are the Hatfields, and as long as you keep your hands off of Logan County men, we will not do anything. But if you don't keep your hands off our men, there is not one of you that will be left in 6 months. There is present at this time 49 of the men who regulated matters at this place a short time ago, and we can get as many as we need in 6 hours. We have a habit of making one-horse lawyers keep their boots, and we have plenty of good, strong 7/8 rope left from Hanging Williams, and our hangman tied a knot for you and laid it quietly away until we see what you do. We have no particular pleasure in hanging dogs, but we know you and have counted the miles and marked the tree. Yours peacefully, so long as you keep your hands off, but with hell in our necks as soon as you make the break. President and Secretary of the Logan County Regulators. Mr. Cline disregarded the threat, and at his instance, new requisitions were issued and additional rewards offered. Governor Wilson's interest. The conduct of Governor Wilson of West Virginia in the matter, although has, the correspondent alleges, been strange. He has had the requisitions from Governor Buckner since last September, but has refused to issue warrants for the apprehension of the men named in the demand. Logan, McDowell, Wayne, and other counties abutting on the Kentucky and Old Virginia state lines are all Democratic. The Hatfields are Democrats and easily sway Logan and McDowell counties. John B. Floyd of the State Department at Charleston is an attorney for the Hatfields. A United States Senator is to be elected next year, and Governor Wilson is a candidate to succeed Senator Kenna. The state is close, and it will be closer. The ordering out of the troops was not a sincere move on the part of Governor Wilson. It was a mistake on his part. He knows that troops could do no good in the mountain passes of Logan, or in the defiles of the hills and mountains, or in the narrow bottoms of the Tug and its influent creeks. Special detectives must do the work. Governor Buckner's ignorance of the county must also be co-equal with Governor Wilson's insincerity in the matter, or he would not have issued his call. Patient detective work is the only solution, and none of the FACARs of Charleston, Fairmont, and other West Virginia towns should be employed. 20 or 25 trained men would arrest the suspected persons without noise or comment and land them in the proper prisons. The gangs and their differences. There's a gang in West Virginia banded together for the purpose of murder and rapine. There is a gang in Kentucky whose cohesive principle is the protection of families and homes of men and women. An unresisting family has been deprived of 5 of its members, a father and mother of 5 of their children, their homes burned, their effects sent up in smoke, their little substance scattered to the wind, themselves forced out at midnight as wanderers on a bleak, inhospitable mountainside, almost naked in the blasts of winter. A mother stands by and sees her son killed before her very eyes without being allowed to speak to him. Farms are destroyed, religious meetings are broken up, men and women whipped. State and county elections interfered with, and terror holds complete sway. To repress the gang that has committed all of these crimes was the Kentucky Gang organized. These are the gangs, their respective histories, objects, and achievements. I have set forth nothing but what I have obtained by careful investigation, extenuated nothing, magnified nothing. I am confident that everything in the matter of the statement of fact and incident is correct. I have talked with scores, adherents of both sides, and given the substance of their statements. Many refuse to allow the use of their names, fearing the vengeance of the Hatfields. Signed, Charles S. Howe, unquote. Additional report. This additional report was tacked on to the last of the Charles S. Howe column. Quote, Governor Wilson's requisition. Charleston, West Virginia, February 1st. The civil authorities have now hold of the remnants of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. And upon a petition from Will Floyd, a citizen of Logan County, this state, Governor Wilson today issued a requisition upon Governor Buckner of Kentucky for the safe delivery of Tom Chambers, A.H. Fadney, Selkirk McCoy, L.D. McCoy, Moses Christian, David Mahon, D.D. Mahon, and Pleasant Mahon, who are alleged to have been implicated in the recent trouble and who are citizens of Logan County, now confined in the jail of Pike County, Kentucky, awaiting trial. The petition further states that the parties above mentioned, as he is informed and believes, were taken from the state without any legal process whatever and in violation of the laws of the state. Unquote. Before we begin, evidently the 5-column article raised quite a stir in West Virginia. There was a huge faction that felt that the article was detrimental to the reputation of Logan, McDowell, and Wayne counties, Governor Wilson, and the state of West Virginia in general. Howe was also being called a liar by the Hatfield clan when he relayed all of the criminal activities. Howe felt that he needed to address these allegations against him in a letter to the editor. In this letter, Howe continues to blast Wilson for his look the other way attitude about what happened between the two families. After all, the entire nation was now looking at Logan County, West Virginia with a critical eye. Potential business opportunities could be threatened because of the continued violence in the region. In Howe's opinion, something needed to be done. We will now read Howe's letter to the editor. Charles Howe responds to the printed article. Quote, Willing Intelligencer, February 4th, 1888. Mr. Howe replies vigorously to the Register's editorial. Sir, The newspaper allegation at present at the head of the register is out in one of those characteristic editorials that are the admiration of all Democrats, from ex-Senator Camden to Bush Price, on my history on the trouble between the Hatfields and McCoys. He assumes that the circulation of these letters will do the state an irreparable injury and characterizes them as nonpareil lies. In my humble way, Mr. Editor, I have done the very best in my power to give the truth in regard to the murder, pillaging, and arson that has characterized the conduct of the Hatfield clan, and am willing to await the arbitrament of the official history in the matter. There are two things, however, that must not be lost sight of in this matter: justice to the McCoys and to the state of West Virginia. Not one of the Hatfield gang, not even one of the 9 murderers now in jail in Pike County, could be found on the occasion of my visit to justify the murder of a single McCoy. That 5 of the McCoy family had been killed under circumstances that had few parallels in criminal history, there is no question. Why, then, have not these murderers been punished? Simply and solely because Governor Wilson has baffled the efforts of Governor Buckner of Kentucky for their apprehension. He has had the requisitions for their apprehension and extradition since September last. Repeated demands have failed to stimulate him to action in the matter. It were better, in his opinion, to allow the state to bear the burden of shame that she is bearing, than to alienate from himself the support of one county solidly Democratic. It were an act of justice both to the McCoys and Hatfields to determine in a court of justice upon whom the responsibility for these infamous crimes should rest. The solution of it is in the hands of Governor Wilson. I have no disposition to embargo the progress of West Virginia. I have done as much as in my humble way to advance her material interest as any other of her natives. It is not apparent to me, however, how the coddling of a gang of murderers, incendiaries, and thieves by the chief magistrate of the state will do anything towards fostering present interest or encouraging valuable immigration. West Virginia needs developing agencies. Capital, energy, enterprise are all essential to her development. Is the fate of the merchant Glen any inducement for men of capital to come into West Virginia? In this instance, a man of means and energy had gone so far as to marry one of the Hatfield blood, but it availed him nothing, as he was shot at the very feet of his wife, whom his supposed murderer made haste to marry himself. What West Virginia needs is a governor who will do all in his power to rid her of such men as the Hatfields, even if he should jeopardize his senatorial prospects in the effort. Expel the Hatfields. Regulate to obscurity the demagogue who sustains and encourages them. Make murder a crime and punish the murderer. Make the state safe as a habitation for respectable people, and the growth of West Virginia will not be problematical. Charles S. Howe, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, February 3rd, 1888. Unquote. As we can see, Howe was not too kind to Governor Wilson or to the Hatfield clan. In next week's video, we will cover chapters 10, 11, and 12 of the article found in The Sun. While this will finish up the Sun article about the Hatfield and McCoy feud, we will then move forward to the reports that were given about the Hatfield trial in Pike County, Kentucky. Thank you. Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the myths and truths of the Hatfield and McCoy feud. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.